She walked up my gravel road like she owned the sun floral dress. Blazing voice oiled with condescension, and told me one sentence that sounded like a verdict. That hideous metal contraption is a lawsuit waiting to happen, and you will remove it by Friday, or we will. I remember the exact feeling, a hot, old anger, the kind that lives in your spine when someone thinks they can rewrite your life with a clipboard. That first encounter is Act 1, the blow that wakes you up. My name is Mac. Sarah and I moved out here to put down roots, real roots, after 20 years of the Army sending us where it pleased. We found a 100-acre patch of Texas that smelled like rain-washed dirt and possibility. I built a ranch, planted a garden that kept us fed, and bought 10 Santa Gertrudis heifers because I wanted something that would outlast me. The only thing between my field and the county road was an old recorded easement, a gravel track that had been used for a century. Teenagers used it as a shortcut. People used it as a place to party. And when your herd starts growing, an unlocked gate is a disaster waiting to happen. Karen was the president of Willow Creek Estates HOA, a woman whose power came from a binder and a phone tree, and she treated that binder like scripture. She stood there on the shoulder of my access road, hands on hips, clipboard, angled like a weapon, and read the covenants as if reciting a prayer. All alterations to common or semi-common areas must receive prior written approval, which is when I realized this was never going to be a polite conversation. Gary, her nodding lieutenant, clutched the clipboard like it was a talisman. I was finishing the last weld on a cattle guard I designed to keep my livestock off the county road. The welding torch had been hissing. The steel smelled like victory. I tapped the new guard with my boot, letting the hollow echo say something about permanence, the thing you build when you mean to be here. I tried to explain Core's tempered calm, and all what a cattle guard does, it lets vehicles pass without anyone opening a gate while keeping animals where they belong. Karen scoffed like I'd offered her a fairy tale. Threats were the next move. Fines, legal action, liens on my property. The envelope that showed up, taped to the guard 2 days later, was Act 1's closing salvo, a formal violation notice, heavy on threats, light on reason. $1,000 to start, $100 a day after, and the looming language about liens and foreclosure. I called an old comrade, David Chen, now a property lawyer, and he grinned like a man who loves a clean legal puzzle. We went digging in county records like archaeologists, leather-bound indexes, microfilm, the smell of old paper and coffee, and found a deed dated April 17, 1928. Jedediah Miller's grant spelled out in plain, nearly miraculous language, a 30-foot perpetual agricultural and access easement, including the right to move, drive, and convey livestock of any and all kinds, and the right to construct and maintain any and all necessary improvements, including but not limited to fences, gates, and cattle guards. Jedediah, almost a century dead, had handed us a silver bullet. Act 2. The counterattack began with a plan. David drafted a calm surgical response. I drove into the manicured streets of Willow Creek with a manila envelope in the passenger seat like a loaded argument. Delivering it to Karen's door was part legal maneuver, part theater. I wanted to see her face. She tore it open, read the deed, then crumpled it, spat that a dusty document couldn't trump modern covenants, and slammed the door in my face. Pride, it seems, can make people deaf to proof. Karen escalated. A lien appeared, and she put up a message on the community page about a dangerous industrial structure, a line meant to whip neighbors into a moral fury without any facts. But momentum turned when Arthur Henderson, an elderly man whose family had farmed around here for generations, chimed in the cattle guard had been the correct historical way to manage livestock by the road. Suddenly the narrative cracked. A quiet IT guy named Mark, tired of petty fines himself, quietly circulated the deed and a one-page fact sheet to neighbors. Small private messages spread faster than Karen's public trumpet. Here's the twist: the thing that saved me wasn't just the deed. It was the people, neighbors, who had been quietly ground down by arbitrary enforcement, who began to see this as their fight too. Once you strip away the smokescreen of community standards, you find patterns. Garden gnomes fined wheelchair ramps, delayed for aesthetics, basketball hoops targeted for the wrong shade. When those stories stack up, authority starts to look less like governance and more like caprice. David told me to be patient. We briefed the sheriff quietly, and I set up cameras, a GoPro on an oak branch, a trail cam in a cedar, my phone ready, not because I wanted a stunt, but because evidence flips the script. When the HOA hired a demolition crew to come onto my land to remove the guard, I walked out folder in hand and met the men. They had chains, a cutting torch, a work order, and then the sheriff's lights glowed in the distance. Karen stormed in furious, ordering them to get to work. The lead contractor hesitated, called his boss, and the word deed rattled like a bell. The sheriff arrived calm and professional, read the scene, and told Karen she was on private property and needed to step back. When two deputies stepped out and Karen's white SUV sat boxed in, she finally heard the word criminal. She was cited for trespass. A report for conspiracy to damage property was filed. That picture, her face blanching, the contractors packing up, deputies holding the line, is the satisfying mid-act reversal where the illusion of absolute local power shattered in plain view. Act 3 was the fallout. David filed for an injunction. The judge, a no-nonsense woman who'd seen too many small-town dramas, read Jedediah Miller's clause and didn't bother with theatrics. Discovery pulled back the tidy curtain internal emails, where Karen told the board to project an image of strength notes about denying reasonable accommodations for the sake of appearances and explicit notes encouraging fines against dissenters. The documents showed not mistakes, but willful choices. That email, the one where she said, "Make them feel isolated," became the smoking gun. At the HOA meeting, the dam broke. People stood, voices shaking at first, and then steady, telling stories of petty cruelty until the room filled with years of small resentments. Susan, the accountant who had urged caution early on, moved for a vote of no confidence. The vote was decisive. Karen's reign ended not with a fiery exit, but with a quiet, ignominious departure. The new board rewrote policies, opened meetings, and invited input, the work of rebuilding trust, slow but real. If there's a moral here, it sneaks up on you like evening light on the porch. Power untethered from humility becomes a weapon. Rules without conscience are just tools for the proud. But the lesson landed on me as well. Preparedness matters more than bluster. You don't win by shouting. You win by showing up with evidence, by building alliances, and by remembering that history and law are sometimes on the side of the quiet guy who wants to tend his land. Life after the fight settled into a better rhythm. We planted another row of tomatoes. Sarah started a small community garden that pulled neighbors together. And the cattle guard, once a point of conflict, became a mundane part of the landscape. It's a permanent piece of steel and concrete now, yes. But it's also a monument to something simpler, that decency and law can outrun petty power. I'm not celebrating vengeance, I'm celebrating accountability. That's a different thing. So I'll leave you with a question that's been sitting with me since the judge banged her gavel: when rules and aesthetics collide with people's lives, who gets to decide what community really means, a small group with a binder or the people who live there? Have you faced a small tyranny, a committee that punished kindness, a boss who misused power and pushed back? Or did you keep quiet, and if so, why? Share your story below. The messy ones, the brave ones, the ones that made you rethink what justice looks like in your little corner of the world.